Deep within the dense forests of North Carolina, abandoned schools rise like silent monuments to the past. By day, they are hidden among towering pines and thick undergrowth, their walls crumbling, windows shattered, and playgrounds overtaken by weeds. By night, the darkness awakens the memories of students, teachers, and secrets long forgotten. Shadows stretch along hallways and overgrown classrooms. Flickering lights illuminate empty blackboards. And the wind carries whispers of lessons never finished, footsteps echoing in corridors that have not felt life for decades. Visitors report seeing pale figures pacing through classrooms. Ghostly hands reaching from doorways. Shadows moving along stairwells where no one walks. Some swear the forest itself carries memory. Rustling unnaturally and shifting paths in the moonlight. A few who linger too long say the schools themselves seem alive. Creaking and groaning under the weight of history. Warning the living to leave. Tonight, my dear friend, we will step into these haunted forest schools. We will walk along moss-covered hallways. Peer into abandoned classrooms. And listen to whispers carried on the night air. We will uncover the most haunted forest schools in North Carolina. Where every hallway, every desk, and every playground holds a story. And the restless refuse to leave. So tell me if you were walking alone through a forest school at midnight, and a pale figure appeared at the end of a hallway, staring silently. Would you step closer to see who it is, or would you retreat toward the forest before the shadows notice you? Hello, my dear friend. I am so glad you are here tonight, safe and warm, because the forest schools we are about to explore are not for the faint of heart. North Carolina's forest schools were once centers of learning and community. Over the decades, many were abandoned after population shifts, fires, or financial troubles. Yet the memories remain. Visitors report shadows moving along the hallways, figures appearing and vanishing in classrooms, and lights flickering with no electricity. Some have felt icy hands brush their arms or shoulders. Others have heard whispers, soft laughter, or cries carried through the overgrown playgrounds. The air in these schools at night is thick with moisture, moss, and history. Corridors twist unexpectedly, and stairs creak under invisible weight. Some have seen lanterns floating above classrooms with no hand holding them. Others feel the presence of unseen watchers pacing silently beside them. And many swear that the schools themselves seem alive, groaning beneath the floors and walls, warning those who dare to enter. Before we explore these haunted forest schools together, my friend, I want to ask you something. And I hope you will answer it in the comments. If you were alone in a forest school at midnight, and you heard your name whispered from a darkened classroom, would you step closer to see who is calling? Or would you leave immediately, hoping the spirit lets you go? Take a deep breath. Steady your heartbeat. And let us explore the most haunted forest schools in North Carolina. Blackwood Forest School lies deep within a dense grove of towering pines, its brick and timber structures hidden among the shadows of the trees. By day, sunlight filters through the branches, revealing crumbling classrooms, broken windows, and ivy climbing along walls that have long been abandoned. The air is thick with the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and aged wood, carrying a quiet sense of stillness that seems to hold every sound in suspension. Walking toward the school, the path narrows between trees, roots twisting along the ground and pine needles muffling footsteps. Even in daylight, there is a sense of anticipation, as if the forest itself holds memory of the countless students and teachers who once filled the halls. Shadows cling to corners and under fallen beams, stretching and shifting with every breeze. As night falls, the forest grows darker, and the school seems to awaken in a subtle, unsettling way. The halls, empty and silent by day, begin to hum with an almost imperceptible energy. Figures are said to appear at the ends of hallways and inside classrooms, moving with quiet purpose. Their forms are human but indistinct, blurred by darkness and faint moonlight filtering through broken windows. Faces and clothing dissolve into shadows, leaving only the impression of motion and presence. Observers describe these figures pacing along the hallways, occasionally stopping near a classroom or leaning over a desk as if recalling a lesson or a long-past conversation. They do not interact with visitors, yet their presence is undeniable, a silent acknowledgement of anyone who walks the abandoned halls after nightfall. Lanterns sometimes flicker along the corridors, casting brief pools of light across cracked floors and scattered papers. No hand holds these lights, no source can be traced. They rise and fall unpredictably, illuminating desks, chalkboards, and worn staircases, giving the impression that the school itself remembers every person who once learned and taught within its walls. Soft footsteps echo across the halls, measured and deliberate, yet producing no visible source. Occasionally, multiple sets of footsteps can be heard, moving in opposite directions or crossing paths, creating the sensation of layered memories replaying in the empty corridors. Faint whispers drift through classrooms and along hallways. Names are softly called, fragments of conversations carried by the wind through broken windows and gaps in the walls. The voices acknowledge the presence of observers without threat, moving independently of the figures, heightening the feeling that the school itself holds memory of every lesson, every voice, every step taken within its walls. Historical accounts indicate that Blackwood Forest School was once a thriving place of learning, serving children from nearby settlements and families who traveled through the forest each day. Over time, as populations shifted and resources dwindled, the school was abandoned. Accidents, illnesses, and untimely deaths occurred in its history. And many believe that the nighttime figures, footsteps, and flickering lights are echoes of those who lived and worked within its walls. Despite the eerie presence, the school does not feel hostile. Figures maintain distance, footsteps remain calm, and whispers are soft. Visitors often describe the experience as observing memory rather than encountering danger, a sensation of history moving through the space rather than threatening those who enter. Sound behaves unpredictably. Footsteps echo differently across broken floors, staircases, and corridors. Whispers drift through rooms and hallways, carried by the air in unexpected directions. The structures themselves amplify and layer sound, creating a sense of presence without revealing its source. Time perception shifts inside Blackwood Forest School at night. Without daylight or familiar reference points, minutes stretch or compress unpredictably. Silence grows heavy, and walking through the halls can feel like moving through layers of memory. Exiting the school produces a sudden return to normal perception, as if leaving one world for another. As the night deepens, activity diminishes. Figures appear less frequently. Footsteps grow softer. Lanterns flicker more sporadically. The school gradually returns to stillness. The air settles around broken desks, leaning blackboards, and shattered windows. By morning, Blackwood Forest School appears unchanged. Sunlight filters through the trees, illuminating crumbling walls, scattered papers, and the forest floor covered with pine needles. Visitors describe lasting impressions, shadows pacing hallways, soft footsteps echoing across classrooms, and whispers drifting through the empty spaces. Visitors describe lasting impressions, shadows pacing hallways, soft footsteps echoing across classrooms, and whispers drifting through the empty spaces. Blackwood Forest School exists through memory and repetition. By day, it rests quietly among the pines. By night, it becomes a stage for figures, footsteps, and flickering lanterns, replaying patterns left behind by those who once learned, taught, and walked its halls. When sunlight returns fully, the school settles into silence once more, waiting patiently for darkness to awaken the echoes of its past again. Widow's Hollow School sits quietly at the edge of a forgotten neighborhood, its brick walls worn and weathered by decades of wind and rain. The brick walls worn and weathered by decades of wind and rain, the windows clouded with dust, and the playground lies overgrown. The windows clouded with dust, and the playground lies overgrown, its swings swaying gently with the slightest breeze. The school earned its name after a series of unexplained disappearances involving teachers many years ago, and the memory of those events lingers in the air, woven into the shadows that fill the hallways and classrooms. And the memory of those events lingers in the air, woven into the shadows that fill the hallways and classrooms. Figures are said to appear suddenly along corridors, moving silently and disappearing just as quickly, while soft cries drift across the abandoned playgrounds, carried on the wind and threading through the empty spaces of the school. During the day, the school appears deceptively quiet and still. Sunlight filters through the broken and grimy windows, illuminating peeling paint, worn floorboards, and scattered debris. Desks lie toppled or stacked haphazardly in corners, and the faint scent of damp wood mixes with the stale air of abandoned classrooms. Every small sound of the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of leaves from outside, the distant tap of a loose shutter echoes through the hallways, emphasizing the emptiness and isolation of the building. The layout of Widowa's Hollow School enhances its eerie presence. Corridors twist between classrooms, leading to stairwells that ascend and descend into darkness. Shadows gather in corners and under doorways, stretching along walls and across floors as the light shifts with the movement of the sun. Each classroom holds its own atmosphere, some cluttered with forgotten textbooks, others empty and silent, each echoing faintly with the past presence of teachers and students. As dusk approaches, the school takes on a different character. The setting sun casts long, distorted shadows through the hallways and onto the playground. Faint cries rise from the distance, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the occasional groan of old wooden structures. The playground equipment sways as if pushed by invisible hands, and the school itself seems to inhale and exhale with the movement of wind through broken windows and doors. The air thickens with a quiet tension, pressing against anyone walking through the empty corridors. It is during these hours that figures are most often reported. They appear along shadowed hallways or crouched in the corners of classrooms, moving with a deliberate, silent rhythm. Their forms are indistinct, blending with darkness and the edges of light. Pausing briefly to glance at any visitor before continuing along familiar routes. The figures do not approach visitors directly. They remain confined to shadowed hallways or classrooms. When observed, they may vanish suddenly, only to reappear further down a corridor or across the playground. Their presence produces a subtle rhythm, felt as much as seen, echoing through the floors, walls, and open spaces, a quiet reminder that the school is not entirely empty. Soft cries persist. They rise from hallways and classrooms, drifting through playgrounds, carried by the wind and amplified by the hollow spaces within the building. The sounds are gentle, disembodied, and shifting, threading along walls and through windows. Occasionally, the cries respond to movement, growing more distinct when a visitor pauses, fading as footsteps carry forward. Together, they create a sense of awareness, an intangible presence that lingers long after the sounds fade. The source of the cries is elusive. They move unpredictably, appearing in one classroom or hallway, then fading only to reappear elsewhere. They follow no pattern discernible to visitors, moving independently of human presence. Silence does not always lessen them, while stillness often amplifies the sensation of being observed. Narrow hallways, open classrooms, and reflective surfaces carry echoes and distort sound. Low light alters perception of forms and motion. While these factors explain minor phenomena, they do not account for repeated sightings of figures or persistent auditory experiences reported over decades. The figures and cries follow subtle patterns. They appear most frequently in low-light conditions, tracing familiar routes along corridors and stairwells. Cries occur in consistent locations, at regular intervals, as if the school preserves fragments of past activity, echoing silently for those who traverse its spaces. Some believe Widow's Hollow School retains memory. Years of teaching, learning, and unexplained disappearances may have left residual impressions in the air, walls, and floors. Figures may be echoes of teachers long gone, preserving routines and presence. Cries may reflect voices once carried through hallways and classrooms, subtly preserved in the environment. Shadows, low light, and reflective surfaces create unique visual and auditory effects. Forms shift unpredictably. Sounds carry an echo across floors, walls, and empty spaces. Combined with isolation and history, these elements produce experiences that feel deliberate. Visitors often describe heightened awareness. Time seems to slow. Distances appear altered. Every step, shadow, and sound carries weight. The school feels alive, attentive yet not hostile. As night deepens, activity gradually diminishes. Figures retreat into shadowed hallways, cries fade across playgrounds, and the wind moves silently through open doors. By morning, Wittawa's Hollow School appears unchanged. Sunlight illuminates hallways and classrooms. Shadows shrink. Figures vanish. Cries leave no trace. Yet those who leave carry a lingering impression. The school retains memory. Figures may still move silently along corridors. Cries may continue to drift through the empty classrooms and playgrounds. Wittawa's Hollow School does not demand belief. It exists quietly, shaped by history, structure, and time. When darkness falls and shadows deepen, it reveals subtle motion and sound, a quiet continuation of what has always been present. Through shadows, wind, and empty spaces, faint cries continue to echo. And when daylight returns, the school stands silent once more, holding memory, presence, and quiet echoes for those who notice its persistence. Ashen Grove School sits abandoned at the edge of the forest, its brick walls peeling and cracked, windows broken and dark. The floors inside are warped and rotted, echoing every cautious step across hallways and classrooms. The scent of mildew and decay hangs in the air, mingling with the faint chill of evening that drifts through broken panes. Long-forgotten desks and chairs lie scattered, some toppled, some still aligned in ghostly order, as though the building itself remembers the days when it was filled with life and laughter. As visitors step into the school, a stillness greets them. The quiet is heavy, almost palpable. Footsteps on rotted wood echo, though they are often interrupted by the soft groan of the building settling. Shadows stretch along the walls and floor, bending strangely under the weak moonlight that filters through shattered windows. Mist drifts through the hallways, blurring corners and folding the familiar into shapes that are subtly wrong, creating a sense that the school is alive and watching. Figures begin to appear in the corners. They crouch low, partially hidden by walls, doorframes, or toppled furniture. Their forms are faint, human in outline yet softened by darkness. When directly observed, they seem to shift, blending with the peeling paint and warped wood. When attention is diverted, they reappear, tracing paths that feel deliberate yet impossible to follow. Visitors feel them before they see them. A sudden chill brushes along the arms, light and precise. Fingers seem to trace lightly over the skin, sending a cold that spreads and lingers for a moment. It is not wind or loose clothing, but an intentional presence, acknowledging the person in the hallway or classroom. Often, turning around reveals only empty floors and darkened corridors. Figures remain partially hidden in corners, shadows that retreat when approached. A fleeting touch along the wrist. A gentle press at the shoulder. The chill is measured and deliberate, never aggressive, but unmistakable. The sensation persists for a brief moment before fading. As visitors continue through hallways, the brushes repeat. The brushes repeat. The school itself seems imbued with memory. Shadows shift without wind, hallways stretch unnaturally, and the mist drifts in patterns that suggest awareness. Moisture clings to floors and walls, catching faint light and glinting across broken boards. Every creak, snap, and groan of the structure carries echoes of footsteps long past. Ashen Grove School seems to preserve gestures, movements, and presences, replaying them silently in the hallways, classrooms, and corners. The school was once a place of daily rhythm. Children moved between rooms, teachers guided lessons, laughter and voices filled the air. After abandonment, the building retained fragments of that life. Today, figures, cold touches, and pale glimpses are remnants of its memory, quietly repeating routines along corridors and within classrooms. As night deepens, the activity becomes more apparent. Figures glide more frequently along hallways, moving silently between classrooms and stairwells. Cold brushes occur near desks, doorframes, and hallway corners. Fingers trace lightly along exposed skin, brief but deliberate. The school seems aware of movement, acknowledging presence without intrusion or threat. Despite the unsettling sensation, there is order. Figures do not advance aggressively. Touch remains brief. Shadows shift independently of the hallways and walls. Every motion unfolds slowly, deliberately, as though following a rhythm embedded in the building itself. Those who pause notice subtle changes. The cold brushes fade. Figures retreat deeper into shadow. Mist thickens in hallways and classrooms, softening edges and swallowing shapes. Silence deepens, patient and attentive, as though the school observes without motion. When movement resumes, it is as before. Figures glide silently along corridors, descend stairwells, and move past classrooms. Shadows shift independently, tracing paths that feel deliberate but without malice. Ashen Grove School is alive with memory, repeating routines long abandoned. Attempts to document these phenomena yield limited clarity. Photographs capture peeling walls, scattered desks, and mist, but fail to define figures. Videos show drifting forms and pale lights that vanish when approached. Audio captures faint echoes of footsteps and distant creaks. Environmental explanations suggest low light, fog, and moisture enhance perception. Shadows may appear to move independently. These factors explain some sensations, but cannot account for the precision, consistency, and deliberate nature of brushes, figures, and pale eyes. As the night reaches its quietest hours, activity diminishes. Figures dissolve into shadow and mist. Cold brushes cease. Pale glimpses vanish. Silence fills the school, holding only faint creaks of rotting wood and distant whispers carried by the wind. By morning, Ashen Grove School appears still and abandoned. Sunlight glints on broken glass and warped floors. Figures no longer appear. Cold touches vanish. The school seems calm, ordinary, and lifeless. Visitors leaving often pause at the threshold, glancing back down hallways. The building seems quiet, yet those who walked it at night remember clearly. Figures gliding silently in corners. Cold hands brushing lightly along arms. Shadows moving independently. The sensation of being acknowledged by the school itself. Figures return to glide along corridors, descend stairwells, and move silently through classrooms. Cold hands brush along arms. Shadows shift independently. And for a brief time, the school remembers the presence it once contained. Before retreating again into shadow, silence, and stillness. Hollow Creek School stands quietly near the banks of a small, meandering forest creek. Its brick walls are weathered, and the windows, many cracked and fogged with age, reflect the surrounding trees and the occasional shimmer of sunlight filtering through the canopy. The wooden doors creak with age, and the tiled roof sags slightly, as though bearing the weight of time and memory. The surrounding forest presses close, the branches dipping near the schoolyard, casting long shadows that stretch across the overgrown grounds. The air carries the scent of damp earth, moss, and decaying leaves, mingling with the faint odor of chalk and old timber, remnants of the building's long-abandoned classrooms. As dusk falls, Hollow Creek School seems to awaken. Shadows glide silently along hallways. Faint, indistinct shapes appear moving through the long corridors. Their movements slow and deliberate. They drift past empty classrooms, through archways, and along stairwells, without ever making a sound. Their outlines blur into the dim light, and their presence is felt more than seen. Sometimes a shadow pauses, as if observing, then continues its quiet journey, leaving only the lingering sense that someone or something is walking beside you. Doors open and close with no wind. Classroom doors creak ajar, then swing shut again, responding to no breeze. Footsteps echo across the floors where no one walks, and lockers clatter softly in the empty halls. The distant squeak of a chair or the soft thud of a book falling can be heard. Each sound is subtle, yet it heightens awareness, creating the sense that the school itself is alive, watching and moving with a rhythm of its own. Visitors report sensations that are difficult to explain. A brush along the shoulder, the feeling of a presence standing just behind, or the sudden chill of an unseen draft. Turning reveals empty halls and vacant classrooms, yet the impression of observation persists. Soft, ghostly sounds carry through the school. Footsteps fall in time with your own, creating echoes that seem to mirror movement. Faint whispers rise from the corners of empty rooms, drifting along the halls. The gentle creak of floorboards and the distant tap of a falling object punctuate the quiet, mingling with the soft gurgle of the creek outside. These sounds are not menacing, but they are persistent, a reminder that the school holds on to memory, preserving echoes of those who once walked its halls. Hollow Creek School was once a bustling center of learning. Children's laughter and chatter once filled the classrooms, mingling with the sound of pencils scratching across paper and the rhythmic tapping of shoes along the hallways. Teachers moved between rooms, calling out instructions, while lessons and lessons long past layered the air with memory. Over time, as the population shifted and newer schools were built, Hollow Creek School was abandoned, leaving only its silent corridors, empty classrooms, and the subtle presence of those who remained. Those who explore the school at night often report strange distortions. Hallways feel longer than they should, corners seem to shift, and shadows move independently of any light source. Figures appear and vanish repeatedly along the corridors, pacing or standing motionless. Footsteps echo perfectly with each visitor, creating the sensation that the building itself is alive, aware of each movement and presence within it. One visitor described walking down the main hallway as fog rolled in from the nearby creek. A pale figure appeared near a classroom door, standing motionless. The light from a distant window cast long, shifting shadows across the floor. A sudden brush of cold air touched the shoulder. Turning revealed only empty halls and the faint rustle of leaves outside. Moments later, the figure vanished entirely, leaving only the soft echoes of footsteps and distant, incomprehensible murmurs. Another group exploring the building reported subtle, repeated movements. Shadows moved silently along walls, gliding past classrooms and up stairwells. Figures appeared intermittently, pausing at windows or near doors, then disappearing into the dimness. Whispered voices rose and fell, close yet untouchable, blending with the ambient sounds of creaking boards and the distant creak. Each person felt a presence alongside them, fleeting and intangible, aware but never hostile. Despite its haunted atmosphere, Hollow Creek School does not feel threatening. Figures do not chase, shadows do not strike. Sounds, when they occur, drift softly through the halls. The tension arises from perception and awareness rather than danger. The school preserves echoes of the past, allowing visitors to walk its corridors freely, while sensing subtle, unseen observers embedded in the building, in the shadows, and in the air itself. As night deepens, activity gradually fades. Shadows settle along the floors and walls. Footsteps and whispers diminish, leaving only the soft sigh of wind through broken windows. And the gentle gurgle of the creek outside. By morning, Hollow Creek School returns to stillness. Sunlight illuminates the dusty floors and overgrown schoolyard. Shadows fall naturally. Figures vanish. Doors rest silently in their frames. The school stands quiet, awaiting darkness to awaken its hidden echoes once more. Shadows glide silently along hallways. Doors open and close with no wind. Footsteps, whispers, and soft creaks linger in the corners. The building observes quietly, preserving echoes of the past into the present for those who wander through its haunted halls. Bloodstone School sits in quiet decay, a building of brick and timber shrouded in shadows and overgrown ivy. The windows are cracked or shattered. Classrooms stand empty. And the corridors are lined with peeling paint and splintered floorboards. By day, the school appears still, its silence deep and heavy. Carrying the scent of old wood, dust, and the faint, lingering aroma of chalk. Walking through the grounds, the air feels dense. Fallen leaves and scattered papers rustle beneath footsteps, yet the atmosphere remains strangely suspended. Even in daylight, there is a sense that the building remembers every student who once passed through its doors, every lesson taught, and every voice raised in laughter or sorrow. Shadows cling to the corners of classrooms and hallways, stretching with the movement of the sun and settling into the dark recesses of the building. As evening descends, the school seems to awaken. The fading light casts long, wavering reflections across broken floors and abandoned desks. Windows reflect the forested surroundings, and the creaking of old boards and the whisper of wind through gaps in the walls create a heightened sense of presence. The silence itself feels alive, anticipating the emergence of something unseen. At night, visitors report seeing figures moving through the halls. They appear in the classrooms, along corridors, and across stairwells, gliding silently with deliberate steps. Their forms are human in outline but blurred in detail, faces indistinct and clothing dissolved into shadow. They do not interact directly, yet their presence is unmistakable, a subtle acknowledgement of anyone who walks the school after dark. Lanterns flicker unpredictably along the hallways and in classrooms, casting pools of warm, shifting light over old desks, chalkboards, and scattered papers. No hand holds them, and no source is visible. The glow rises and falls, illuminating spaces that have not felt life in decades, giving the impression that the school itself remembers its past occupants and their routines. Soft footsteps echo across cracked floors. They move deliberately, sometimes in single lines, other times in multiple, intersecting patterns. The sound suggests movement through the halls, a replay of memory layered upon memory. Each step is precise and purposeful, yet produces no visible source, heightening the sense that the building itself holds the imprint of the lives that once passed through it. Whispers drift through the classrooms and along corridors, soft and indistinct. Names are murmured, fragments of conversations, carried on drafts through broken windows or gaps in the walls. The voices are not threatening, they acknowledge the presence of observers, adding to the impression that the school is alive with memory and history, not hostility. Historical accounts of Bloodstone School reveal a site touched by tragedy. Accidents, illnesses, and other untimely events marked its history. And many believe the night figures, footsteps, and flickering lanterns are echoes of those who lived, learned, and sometimes died within these walls. Visitors who enter the school after dark often describe a sense of witnessing history rather than encountering danger. A quiet connection to lives that once animated the building. A sense of witnessing history rather than encountering danger, a quiet connection to lives that once animated the building. Sound behaves unpredictably in the school. Whispers drift in unpredictable directions, creating the sense of presence without revealing the source. Each room holds its own resonance, layered with memory and experience. Time perception shifts at night. Minutes stretch or compress without warning. Silence grows heavy, and walking through the halls can feel like moving through multiple layers of memory. Exiting the school restores normal perception, as if leaving one reality for another. As the night progresses, activity diminishes. Figures appear less frequently, footsteps soften, and lanterns flicker sporadically. The school gradually returns to stillness, settling over empty desks, leaning blackboards, and broken windows. By morning, Bloodstone School appears unchanged. Sunlight filters through shattered panes, highlighting crumbling walls and classrooms left to decay. No visible traces remain of figures, footsteps, or flickering lights from the night before, only the lingering impression left upon those who walked the halls after dark. Visitors often describe lasting impressions: shadows moving across classrooms, soft footsteps echoing along the halls, and whispers drifting from room to room. Bloodstone School exists in memory and repetition. By day, it rests silently among overgrown grounds. By night, it becomes a stage for figures, footsteps, and flickering lanterns, replaying patterns left by those who once walked its corridors. When daylight returns fully, the school settles once more, waiting patiently for darkness to awaken the echoes of its past again. Ironclad School stands silently at the edge of a forgotten neighborhood, its towering iron staircases and rusted railings casting long shadows along the corridors. The building earned its reputation after a series of unexplained disappearances involving staff and students decades ago. During the day, Ironclad School appears deceptively ordinary. Sunlight filters through tall, narrow windows, glinting off rusted railings and illuminating dust-covered floors. The faint scent of metal and old wood mingles with stale air, and every small noisia: the creak of a floorboard, the scrape of a loose hinge, the wind rattling a window echoes unnaturally through the hallways. The architecture of the school amplifies its eerie presence. Corridors wind between classrooms, staircases climb in narrow, twisting patterns, and iron railings cast long, angular shadows that stretch and move as the light shifts. Shadows gather in corners, beneath stairs, and along walls, forming shapes that seem to shift imperceptibly as one walks past. Each step along the hallways feels observed, as if the building itself remembers the presence of those who once moved through its spaces. As evening approaches, the school takes on a different character. The sun sinks low, casting the corridors in deep shadow and coloring the iron structures with a coppery glow. Faint whispers rise from empty classrooms and stairwells, mingling with the groan of iron under shifting temperatures. The atmosphere thickens, carrying a quiet tension that presses against anyone walking the halls, making the air feel heavy and the building alive in its silence. It is during these hours that the figures are most often seen. They move silently along corridors and staircases, their forms indistinct and merging with shadows. Sometimes a figure pauses at the top of a staircase or peeks around a corner, watching before vanishing as though never present. Their movements are deliberate and repetitive, tracing the same paths that staff and students once traveled decades ago. The figures do not approach visitors directly. They remain in shadowed corners, along stairwells, and near abandoned classrooms. When observed, they often disappear only to reappear further down the hall or on a different floor. Their presence produces a subtle rhythm, echoing softly along the iron and stone, a silent reminder that the school is never truly empty. Alongside these visual phenomena, footsteps echo persistently. They rise and fall unpredictably, following corridors, climbing staircases, and reverberating across empty classrooms. Sometimes the echoes seem to respond to movement, growing louder when a visitor pauses, fading as steps continue. The combination of sight and sound creates an unshakable sense of awareness, a sensation that someone or something is present, though never directly confronting. The source of the footsteps is elusive. They shift along hallways and stairwells, appearing in one location only to fade and resurface elsewhere. The sounds are independent of any visitor, following the natural flow of the building and the iron structures, making their origin impossible to pinpoint. Walking does not always reduce them, while stillness can intensify the sense of presence. Researchers studying abandoned institutional buildings note that perception of sound and movement can behave unpredictably. Narrow corridors, reflective iron, and open stairwells carry echoes in unusual ways. Shadows and low light create illusions of movement. While these factors may explain minor phenomena, they cannot account for repeated sightings or auditory experiences reported over decades. Figures and sounds follow subtle patterns. They appear most frequently in dimly lit corridors or near stairwells, moving along familiar paths. Footsteps occur in consistent locations and intervals, as if the building preserves fragments of past routines, echoing silently for those who walk its halls. Some believe Ironclad School retains memory. Decades of human presence, combined with unexplained disappearances, may have left residual impressions in the air, the iron, and the floors. Figures may be echoes of teachers and students long gone, preserving movements and routines. Footsteps may reflect the long-forgotten activity of those who once filled the building. Others point to environmental factors. Shadows, low light, and reflective surfaces create unique visual and auditory effects. Shapes appear to shift unpredictably, and sounds carry differently along iron, stone, and wood. Combined with isolation and history, these elements produce experiences that feel deliberate and attentive. Visitors often describe heightened awareness. Time seems to stretch. Distances feel altered. Every step, shadow, and sound carries significance. Figures retreat into shadowed corners, footsteps fade along corridors, and the air grows still. By morning, Ironclad School appears unchanged. Sunlight illuminates stairwells, classrooms, and corridors. Shadows shrink. Figures vanish. Yet those who depart carry a lingering impression. Not of fear, but of awareness. The school retains memory. Figures may still move silently along corridors and stairwells. Ironclad School does not demand belief. It exists quietly, shaped by history, structure, and time. When darkness falls and shadows deepen, it reveals subtle motion and sound, a quiet continuation of what has always been present. Along stairwells and corridors, figures still move silently. Through shadows, iron, and empty rooms, footsteps continue to echo. And when daylight returns, the school stands silent once more, holding memory, presence, and quiet echoes for those who notice its persistence. Mistvale School stands at the edge of the forest, shrouded in fog that drifts silently through broken windows and along empty hallways. The brick walls are cracked and weathered, paint peeling in long strips, revealing layers of history beneath. The fog drifts silently through broken windows and along empty hallways. Desks are overturned, chairs lie scattered, and chalkboards are coated in dust and fading chalk marks. The air is heavy with the scent of damp wood, mildew, and cold stone. The building itself seems to breathe, each shadow and misty corner alive with a quiet presence. As visitors enter, a palpable stillness greets them. The silence is interrupted only by the soft echo of footsteps across the hall, absorbed quickly by the mist curling along the floors. Shadows stretch unnaturally along walls and beneath windows, bending and folding the familiar into something subtly wrong. Every creak of a floorboard, every groan of aging timber carries with it a weight of history, as though the school itself remembers the presence of those who once filled it with sound and movement. Figures begin to appear along the hallways. They glide silently between classrooms, crouch near doorways, or linger in corners, their forms softened by fog and darkness. Human in outline, yet somehow indistinct, they blend into the peeling walls and scattered debris. Observers notice them more in the periphery than directly. When attention shifts, they reappear, tracing paths that feel deliberate yet impossible to follow fully. Visitors feel them before they see them. A sudden brush along the arm, cold and deliberate, spreads quickly before fading. The touch is precise, unlike any wind or shifting clothing. Often, when turning to find the source, there is nothing. A fleeting touch on the wrist. A subtle press at the shoulder. The chill is measured and deliberate, never threatening, but unmistakable. The school itself seems alive with memory. Shadows shift without any breeze. Fog coils along corridors, winding around desks and stairwells, moving with a pattern that suggests awareness. Moisture glistens across rotting wood and cracked tile, catching stray moonlight through broken windows. Every faint creak, snap, or groan carries echoes of footsteps long past. Mistvale School appears to preserve movement, gestures, and presences, replaying them silently in hallways, classrooms, and stairwells. The school was once vibrant with life. Children moved between rooms, teachers guided lessons, and laughter and voices filled the halls. After abandonment, the building retained fragments of that life. Today, figures, cold touches, and glowing eyes are remnants of its memory, quietly repeating routines along corridors and within classrooms. As night deepens, activity grows more pronounced. Figures glide more frequently along hallways and stairwells. Cold brushes are felt near doorframes, desks, and classroom corners. Fingers trace lightly along exposed skin, brief yet deliberate. The building seems aware of movement, acknowledging presence without interfering. Despite the unsettling nature of these encounters, there is order. Figures do not approach aggressively. Touches remain brief. Shadows drift independently of hallways and walls, moving without obstruction. Every motion unfolds slowly and deliberately, as though following a rhythm embedded in the structure itself. Those who pause notice subtle changes. Cold brushes fade. Figures retreat into shadows and fog. Mist thickens along hallways and stairwells, softening edges and swallowing shapes. Silence deepens, patient and attentive, as though the school observes without motion. As though the school observes without motion. When movement resumes, it mirrors prior patterns. Figures glide silently along corridors, through classrooms, and down stairwells. Cold brushes occur along arms. Shadows shift independently, tracing paths that feel deliberate but never threatening. Attempts to document these phenomena produce limited clarity. Video footage reveals drifting forms and faint glowing points that vanish when approached. Audio records only distant echoes of footsteps, creaking wood, and faint, indistinct sounds. Mistvale School is alive with memory, repeating routines long abandoned. Environmental explanations suggest low light, fog, and moisture enhance perception. As the night reaches its quietest hours, activity diminishes. Cold brushes cease. Glowing eyes vanish. Silence fills the school, leaving only faint creaks of rotting wood and distant whispers carried by the wind. By morning, Mistvale School appears ordinary. Sunlight illuminates cracked walls and scattered desks. Visitors leaving often pause at the entrance, glancing down hallways one last time. The school seems quiet, yet those who explored it at night remember clearly. Figures gliding silently along corridors. Cold hands brushing lightly along arms. Shadows moving independently. Mistvale School remains, shaped by fog, decay, and memory. By day, it is silent and ordinary. By night, when mist drifts through hallways and shadows lengthen, it becomes something entirely different. Figures return to glide along corridors, descend stairwells, and move silently through classrooms. Cold hands brush lightly along arms. Shadows shift independently. And for a brief time, the school remembers the presence it once contained before retreating again into shadow, silence, and stillness. Shadowbank School sits quietly amidst dense, overgrown grounds, its brick walls weathered by years of wind and rain. The windows, dark and mottled with age, reflect the skeletal branches of trees that press close to the building. Long corridors stretch through the school, narrow and dimly lit by what little moonlight filters through the broken panes. Wooden floors creak softly under the weight of memory, and the air carries the faint scent of damp earth, old paper, and the lingering presence of years gone by. As night descends, Shadowbank School begins to stir. Figures appear pacing silently along the corridors. Pale and indistinct, they move deliberately along the hallways, pausing at classroom doors, stairwells, or empty lockers. Their forms blur into shadow, and their faces are softened by darkness. When confronted, they vanish, only to reappear moments later along a different section of the building, tracing paths that seem familiar yet impossible. Their presence is felt more than seen, leaving an impression of observation and lingering awareness. Visitors often sense a presence beside them. A soft brush against the shoulder, a sudden chill at the back of the neck, the feeling of eyes following their every step. Turning reveals empty hallways and abandoned classrooms, yet the impression persists. Shadowbank School seems aware of those who enter, responding subtly to each step, each pause, and each movement along its worn floors. Soft, ghostly sounds echo through the building. Footsteps fall where no one walks. Doors swing open and close with no wind. Lockers clatter softly, and the faint whisper of voices drifts through the corridors. Occasionally, a chair shifts, a book falls, or the creak of a floorboard punctuates the quiet. These sounds are never aggressive, but they are persistent, a reminder that the school holds memory, preserving echoes of those who once passed through its halls. Shadowbank School was once a thriving center of learning. Students filled the hallways with laughter and chatter, while teachers moved from room to room delivering lessons. The sound of pencils scratching on paper and shoes tapping along wooden floors created a rhythm that echoed throughout the building. Over time, as populations shifted and newer schools were built, Shadowbank School was abandoned. What remains is the skeleton of its former life, haunted by the echoes of children and educators, preserved in shadow and sound. Explorers at night often notice subtle distortions. Hallways seem longer than reason allows. Shadows twist independently of light sources. Figures appear and disappear repeatedly, pacing invisible paths. Footsteps echo perfectly in rhythm with visitors' own, creating the impression that the school is alive, aware of each movement and presence within it. One visitor described walking down the main corridor. A figure appeared near a classroom doorway, standing motionless. Moonlight cast long shadows that shifted across the floor and walls. A sudden brush of cold air passed across the shoulder. Turning revealed only empty hallways and vacant classrooms. Moments later, the figure vanished, leaving behind the soft echo of footsteps and a faint, indistinct murmur that seemed to drift from the far end of the hall. Another group exploring multiple sections reported similar occurrences. Shadows glided past silently, figures appeared intermittently near doors or windows, then vanished into the darkness. Whispered voices rose and fell, close yet untouchable, blending with the ambient creaks of floorboards and the faint sigh of wind through broken panes. Each person sensed a presence alongside them, fleeting and intangible, aware but never threatening. Despite its haunted reputation, Shadowbank School does not feel hostile. Figures do not chase. Shadows do not strike. Sounds drift softly through the corridors. The tension arises from perception and awareness rather than danger. The school preserves echoes of the past, allowing visitors to walk freely while sensing subtle observers embedded in the walls, floors, and hallways. As night deepens, activity gradually fades. Shadows settle along the floors and walls. Footsteps and whispers recede, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves outside and the soft creak of boards settling. By morning, Shadowbank School returns to stillness. Sunlight illuminates dusty floors and overgrown grounds. Shadows fall naturally. Figures vanish. Doors remain quietly in place. The building rests, awaiting darkness to awaken its hidden echoes once more. Shadowbank School exists where memory, shadow, and silence converge. Figures pace silently along corridors. Shadows glide along hallways. The building observes quietly, preserving echoes of the past into the present for those who wander its haunted halls. Dead Man's Hollow School stands quietly among overgrown grounds, its brick walls weathered and covered with creeping ivy. The windows are cracked, and classrooms sit empty, their floors scattered with leaves, dust, and forgotten papers. The silence stretching across hallways and staircases, interrupted only by the wind weaving through broken panes and the distant rustle of trees. Walking toward the school, the path narrows between dense trees, their branches stretching overhead to form dark corridors of shadow. Even in daylight, there is a sense that the building holds memory, that every step, every voice, and every movement from years past lingers in the air. Shadows cling to corners and under fallen beams, shifting with each moment, as if the school itself is observing. As night descends, the school seems to awaken. The wind carries a faint echo of distant voices and the soft creaking of old floorboards. Every sound is magnified, drawing attention to spaces that during the day seem ordinary, yet at night are layered with history and presence. Visitors often report seeing figures moving silently along the halls. They appear at the end of corridors, near classrooms, or gliding along stairwells. Their forms are human in outline but indistinct, blurred by darkness and faint moonlight. Faces and clothing are unrecognizable, leaving only the impression of motion and presence. These figures do not interact with visitors, yet their presence is unmistakable. Some pause in classrooms, hovering over old desks, as though recalling lessons or conversations long gone. Their movements are deliberate, measured, and purposeful, leaving a lasting sense of observation. Lanterns occasionally flicker along the hallways or in the classrooms. No hands hold these lights, and no source is visible. The glow rises and falls unpredictably, illuminating broken desks, leaning blackboards, and cracked floors. The effect is eerie yet mesmerizing, creating the sense that the school itself remembers and manifests fragments of the past. Soft footsteps echo across the corridors. Sometimes multiple sets are heard, moving in different directions or intersecting. They create a layered effect, like a record of past movement replaying in the present. Each step is clear and deliberate yet produces no visible source, heightening the sense that the building holds memory of all who once walked within it. Faint whispers drift through classrooms and halls. Names are softly called, fragments of conversation float along drafts, moving through open windows and gaps in walls. The voices are not threatening, they acknowledge the presence of visitors, adding to the impression that the school is alive with memory and history, not danger. Historical accounts describe Deadman's Hollow School as a place touched by tragedy. Accidents, illnesses, and untimely deaths marked its history. Many believe the figures, footsteps, and flickering lanterns are echoes of those who lived, learned, and sometimes perished within the building. Visitors often report feeling a quiet connection to the past, as though witnessing memory rather than encountering threat. Each room carries its own resonance, layered with memory and experience. Sound behaves unpredictably in the school. Time perception changes at night. Without daylight or familiar reference points, minutes stretch or compress unpredictably. Silence grows heavy, and moving through the halls can feel like passing through layers of memory. Exiting the school restores normal perception, leaving behind the uncanny sensation of the past lingering in the air. As the night deepens, activity diminishes. Figures appear less frequently, footsteps grow softer, and lanterns flicker more sporadically. The school gradually settles into quiet, the air heavy with memory, while classrooms and hallways return to stillness. By morning, Deadman's Hollow School appears unchanged. Sunlight filters through broken windows, illuminating cracked floors, leaning blackboards, and dusty desks. No visible traces remain of figures, footsteps, or lanterns from the night before. Only the lasting impression on those who experienced the school after dark. Visitors often describe enduring impressions. Shadows pacing halls. Soft footsteps echoing along staircases. And whispers drifting from room to room. Deadman's Hollow School exists in layers of memory and repetition. By day, it rests silently, overgrown and weathered. By night, it becomes a stage for figures, footsteps, and flickering lanterns. Replaying the echoes of those who once lived and walked its halls. When sunlight returns fully, the school settles into stillness once more. Waiting patiently for darkness to awaken the whispers and movements of its past again. Hollow Oak School rises quietly at the edge of a long-forgotten neighborhood. Its old oak beams stretching along hallways and stairwells, casting deep shadows that seem to shift with the movement of light. The building holds a history of vanished teachers and students, their disappearances lingering in the memory of the place. Visitors often report seeing figures moving silently along corridors, while faint murmurs echo through the halls. As if the school itself remembers the footsteps and voices of those long gone. During daylight, the school appears deceptively calm. Sunlight filters through tall, dusty windows, illuminating worn floors and peeling paint along walls. Classrooms sit abandoned, desks arranged neatly or left scattered, and a faint scent of aged wood and lingering dust fills the air. Every small sound of the creak of a floorboard, the whisper of wind through broken panes, the scrape of loose shutters carries unnaturally, echoing along corridors and emphasizing the vast emptiness. The architecture of Hollow Oak School enhances its presence. Corridors twist between classrooms, staircases ascend in narrow spirals, and the oak beams stretch overhead, creating patterns of shadow and light that bend and move as the day shifts. Shadows gather in corners and beneath doorways, stretching across floors as if following invisible paths. The structure of the building amplifies every sound, every movement, making the school feel alive with the presence of the past. As evening approaches, the atmosphere changes. The setting sun casts elongated shadows across corridors and classrooms, coloring the oak with deep amber and darkening hallways into almost complete black. Faint murmurs rise from unseen sources, drifting along the hallways and through open doors. The air feels heavier, pressing subtly against anyone walking the halls, heightening the sense of unseen eyes observing every step. It is during these hours that figures are most often seen. They move silently along corridors or linger at the tops of staircases, their forms blending with shadows. Sometimes they pause, glancing at a visitor before continuing along a familiar path. Their movements are deliberate, tracing the routines of teachers and students long absent, preserving echoes of daily life within the building. The figures do not approach visitors directly. They remain within corridors, classrooms, or stairwells. When looked upon, they may vanish suddenly, only to reappear elsewhere. Their presence produces a subtle rhythm, echoing softly along walls and floors, reminding those who walk the halls that the school is never entirely empty. Alongside the figures, faint murmurs persist. They drift from classrooms, stairwells, and hallways, mingling with the rustle of leaves outside and the occasional groan of settling wood. The murmurs shift unpredictably, appearing in one location and fading only to return elsewhere, independent of human presence. Their presence creates an awareness, a feeling of being observed without confrontation. The source of the murmurs remains elusive. Narrow hallways, reflective surfaces, and open stairwells carry sounds in unique ways. While these factors explain minor phenomena, they do not account for the repeated sightings and auditory experiences reported over decades. Figures and murmurs follow subtle patterns. They appear most frequently in low light or shadowed corners, tracing familiar paths along corridors and stairwells. Murmurs occur in consistent locations and intervals, as if the building preserves fragments of past activity, echoing silently for those who move through it. Some believe Hollow Oak School retains memory. Decades of teaching, learning, and unexplained disappearances may have left residual impressions in the air, wood, and floors. Figures may be echoes of those who once walked the halls, preserving routines and presence. Murmurs may reflect voices that once filled classrooms, subtly preserved in the environment. Others attribute the phenomena to environmental effects. Shadows, low light, and reflective surfaces create unique visual and auditory effects. Shapes shift unpredictably. Sounds carry differently along wood, floors, and walls. Combined with the Skula's isolation and history, these elements produce experiences that feel deliberate. Visitors often describe heightened awareness. Time seems altered, distances appear distorted, and every step, shadow, and sound carries weight. The school feels alive, attentive yet not hostile. As night deepens, activity gradually diminishes. Figures retreat into shadowed corners, murmurs fade through classrooms, and the building settles, though it remains never entirely empty. By morning, Hollow Oak School appears unchanged. Sunlight illuminates corridors and stairwells. Shadows shrink. Shadows shrink. Figures vanish. Murmurs leave no trace. Yet those who leave carry an enduring impression. Not of fear, but of awareness. The school retains memory. Figures may still move silently along corridors. Murmurs may continue to echo through empty classrooms and stairwells. Hollow Oak School does not demand belief. It exists quietly, shaped by history, structure, and time. When darkness falls and shadows deepen, it reveals subtle motion and sound, a continuation of what has always been present. Along corridors and stairwells, figures still move silently. Through shadows, oak beams, and empty classrooms, faint murmurs continue to echo. And when daylight returns, the school stands silent once more, holding memory, presence, and quiet echoes for those who notice its persistence. Black Pine School sits quietly among tall pine trees, their dark trunks rising along the edges of the schoolyard. The branches sway lightly in the wind, casting long, shifting shadows across the ground and over the weathered brick of the building. Windows are intact but streaked with age and dirt, and the paint along the walls has begun to fade and peel. The schoolyard is empty, the playground silent, yet a sense of presence lingers in the air, subtle and chilling. Visitors stepping onto the grounds feel an immediate stillness. Every footstep on the cracked pavement echoes sharply, absorbed quickly by the surrounding forest. The shadows cast by the pines bend and stretch strangely under the faint light of the moon. Even the air seems denser here, heavy with a cold that seeps into clothing and skin. There is a feeling that the school itself is watching, aware of every movement, every small disturbance. Figures begin to emerge within the shadows. They crouch along the edges of the schoolyard, appear along hallways, and glide silently across the grounds. Their outlines are human but softened by darkness, blending into the gloom of tree trunks and building corners. When observed directly, they shift and fade, becoming part of the shadows themselves. When attention drifts, they reappear, moving along paths that seem deliberate yet impossible to track fully. Visitors feel them before seeing them. A cold brush traces along the arm, shoulder, or neck, spreading quickly before fading. It is not the wind or loose clothing, but a precise, deliberate presence acknowledging someone passing through. The touch is never aggressive, yet unmistakable, leaving a shiver that lingers. Turning often reveals nothing. Empty schoolyard, darkened hallways, and still classrooms appear, yet the sensation persists. As visitors continue walking, the brushes repeat. A fleeting touch along the wrist. A subtle press at the shoulder. Each cold trace is brief and measured, leaving the mind aware that something unseen moves just out of sight. The school itself seems alive with memory. The wind seems to flow through hallways differently than in open air, guiding fog and mist in strange patterns. Moisture clings to brick and wood, glinting faintly in the moonlight. Every creak of flooring, every groan of timber carries echoes of the past, of footsteps long gone. Black Pine School preserves traces of life, replaying them silently in corners, hallways, and shadowed classrooms. Once, the school was filled with sound and motion. Children ran across the yard, teachers guided lessons, and voices echoed in every hallway. When abandoned, the school retained fragments of that life. Today, figures, cold touches, and glimpses of pale eyes are remnants of that history, quietly repeating routines across the grounds and within classrooms. As night deepens, activity becomes more frequent. Figures glide along hallways and across the yard. Cold brushes are felt near walls, doorways, and playground equipment. Fingers trace lightly along exposed skin, brief and deliberate. The building seems aware of presence, acknowledging without interfering. Despite the unsettling sensation, there is order. Figures do not approach aggressively. Touches remain fleeting. Shadows move independently of walls and trees, tracing paths that avoid obstruction. Every motion unfolds slowly, deliberately, as though following a rhythm embedded in the school itself. Those who pause notice subtle shifts. The cold brushes fade. Figures retreat deeper into shadows. Mist thickens across the schoolyard and through hallways, softening edges and swallowing shapes. Silence deepens, patient and observant. When movement resumes, it mirrors prior patterns. Figures glide silently along hallways and across the grounds. Cold brushes occur along arms. Shadows shift independently, moving with intent but without threat. Black Pine School is alive with memory, repeating routines long abandoned. Attempts to capture these phenomena produce limited clarity. Photographs show empty schoolyards, hallways, and classrooms, sometimes capturing faint forms or shifting shadows. Videos reveal drifting shapes and pale lights that vanish when approached. Audio records only distant creaks, wind through trees, and faint echoes of footsteps. Environmental factors like low light, mist, and wind explain some perceptions. Shadows may appear to move independently. These conditions cannot account for the precision, consistency, and deliberate nature of brushes, figures, and glowing eyes. As night reaches its quietest hours, activity diminishes. Figures dissolve into shadow. Cold brushes vanish. Pale glimpses fade. Silence fills the school, leaving only faint creaks of wood and distant rustling of pine needles. By morning, Black Pine School appears ordinary. Sunlight filters through trees, glinting on peeling paint and cracked pavement. Figures no longer appear. Cold touches are gone. The school seems calm, quiet, and abandoned. Visitors leaving often glance back. The school appears still, yet those who walked it at night remember. Figures gliding silently along hallways and yard. Cold hands brushing lightly along arms. Shadows moving independently. The sense of being observed, acknowledged by the building itself, lingers. Figures return to glide along hallways, across the yard, and between classrooms. Cold hands brush lightly along arms. Shadows move independently. And for a brief time, the school remembers the presence it once contained before retreating again into shadow and stillness. Ghostlight School rests quietly on the edge of a forested hillside, its brick walls weathered and darkened by decades of wind and rain. Windows, mottled with age, reflect the surrounding trees, and faint beams of moonlight pierce the darkness, revealing the contours of the overgrown schoolyard. The wooden doors, worn smooth by countless hands, hang slightly crooked in their frames, and the tiled roof sags in places, bearing the weight of years gone by. The forest presses close, branches brushing against walls and casting long, shifting shadows across the grounds. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth, moss, and decaying leaves, mingling with the faint odor of old paper and chalk, remnants of lessons long past. As night falls, Ghostlight School begins to awaken. Lanterns float along hallways with no hand holding them. Soft, warm light drifts through the corridors, swaying gently as if carried by unseen currents. Their glow illuminates the worn floors and shadowed corners, highlighting areas that otherwise seem ordinary. The lanterns move forward or backward, rising above the ground or dipping low near classroom doors, tracing paths that hint at the history embedded in the building. The lanterns do not guide nor chase, they simply appear, moving along the halls with a calm, deliberate presence. Figures stand silently in classrooms. Pale and indistinct, they appear near desks or along walls, motionless yet unmistakably present. Their forms blur into the shadows, and their faces are softened by darkness. Occasionally, they shift slightly, a turn of the head or a small step, but they remain silent and distant. Confronted directly, they vanish, only to reappear elsewhere, moving along invisible paths etched into the memories of the building. Visitors often feel a presence nearby. A brush along the shoulder, the sense of eyes tracking each movement, or the sudden chill of an unseen draft. Turning reveals empty classrooms and silent hallways. Yet the impression persists. A sensation is never threatening but insistent, a reminder of the lingering past that inhabits the building. Footsteps echo along empty halls, synchronized oddly with the visitora's own. Doors swing open and shut with no wind to move them. Lockers clatter softly in deserted corridors. Occasionally, the soft scrape of a chair or the faint thump of a book falling can be heard. Each sound is subtle yet heightens awareness, creating the impression that the school is alive, moving in rhythm with the memories it preserves. Ghostlight School was once a center of learning. Children filled the hallways with laughter and chatter, the scratch of pencils against paper, and the rhythmic tapping of shoes on wooden floors. Teachers moved from room to room, lessons echoing through corridors. Over the years, as newer schools were built and populations shifted, Ghostlight School was abandoned, leaving behind empty classrooms, shadowed hallways, and the faint presence of those who once walked its halls. Explorers at night report strange distortions. Hallways seem longer than reason allows. Shadows twist independently of any light source. Figures appear repeatedly along invisible paths. One visitor described walking down the main corridor as fog rolled in from the nearby forest. A pale figure appeared near a classroom door, standing motionless. Lantern light floated overhead, casting long shadows that shifted across floors and walls. A cold brush passed across the shoulder. Turning revealed empty halls and darkened rooms stretching into the distance. Moments later, the figure vanished entirely, leaving only the soft echoes of footsteps and a faint, distant murmur. Another group exploring multiple classrooms reported repeated phenomena. Shadows moved silently past walls. Figures appeared intermittently near doors or windows, then vanished into the darkness. Whispered voices rose and fell. Close yet untouchable, blending with the creak of floorboards and the soft sigh of wind through broken panes. Each visitor sensed a presence alongside them, fleeting and intangible, aware but never hostile. Figures do not chase. Shadows do not strike. Sounds drift softly through the halls. The tension arises from perception and awareness rather than danger. The building preserves echoes of the past, allowing visitors to walk freely while sensing subtle, unseen observers embedded in walls, floors, and hallways. By morning, Ghostlight School returns to stillness. Sunlight illuminates dusty floors, overgrown grounds, and darkened classrooms. Shadows fall naturally. Figures vanish. Doors remain quietly in place. The school rests, waiting for darkness to awaken its hidden echoes once more. Lanterns float along hallways with no hand holding them. Figures stand silently in classrooms. Pale faces linger in the shadows. The building observes quietly, preserving echoes of the past into the present for those who wander its haunted halls. Ashwood School sits quietly among tall, swaying trees, its brick walls worn and faded with age. The windows are clouded and some shattered. While the halls inside are lined with peeling paint, broken desks, and chalkboards faded by years of neglect. By day, the school is silent, its empty classrooms and deserted hallways appearing frozen in time. As if waiting for the footsteps and voices of students long gone. Walking toward the building, the air grows dense with the scent of old wood, dust, and the faint smell of chalk. The surrounding trees cast long shadows over the path, and every footstep on the cracked pavement seems to echo into the stillness. Even in daylight, there is a sense of anticipation, a feeling that the building remembers those who once filled its halls with learning and laughter. As darkness falls, the atmosphere shifts. The fading light casts long, shifting shadows along corridors and staircases. The wind moves through broken windows and gaps in the walls, carrying soft creaks and whispers. Every corner and abandoned classroom seems to hold memory, as if the school itself is breathing quietly, waiting for nightfall to reveal its secrets. Figures begin to emerge along the hallways, moving silently but deliberately. They glide past classrooms, stairwells, and corridors. Their forms human in shape but indistinct in detail. Faces and clothing blur into shadow, leaving only the impression of presence. They do not approach visitors but seem aware of them. Their movements tracing patterns that suggest memory rather than threat. In classrooms, figures pause near desks or blackboards, lingering as if recalling lessons long forgotten. Some appear to glance toward windows, others remain motionless, their presence only implied by the subtle shift of shadow or the faint creak of a floorboard. There is no malice, only the sensation that the school remembers every person who once occupied its spaces. Lanterns sometimes flicker along hallways and in classrooms. No hands hold them, and no source is visible. They rise and fall unpredictably, illuminating broken desks, leaning blackboards, and scattered papers, creating a sense that the building itself recalls the presence of those who once walked within it. Soft footsteps echo across the floors, precise and deliberate, yet producing no visible source. Sometimes multiple sets move in opposite directions, crossing paths and layering upon one another, as if time itself has folded within the building. Each step is a memory replayed, a reminder of the lives once lived within the walls. Whispers drift through hallways and classrooms, faint and indistinct. Names are softly called, fragments of conversations carried on drafts of wind through broken windows or cracks in the walls. The voices are not threatening, they seem to acknowledge the presence of visitors, adding to the sense that the school holds the memories of its past in an almost tangible way. Historical accounts indicate that Ashwood School was once a thriving place of learning, serving children from surrounding towns and families who traveled through the forested path each day. Over time, as populations shifted and resources dwindled, the school was abandoned. Tragedies and untimely deaths occurred throughout its history. And many believe the nighttime figures, footsteps, and flickering lanterns are echoes of those who once lived and learned there. Sound behaves unpredictably within the building. Footsteps echo differently depending on floorboards, staircases, and hallways. Whispers drift in unexpected directions, amplifying the sense of presence without revealing a source. Each room holds its own resonance, layered with memory and experience. Minutes stretch or compress unpredictably. Silence grows heavy, and moving through the hallways feels like passing through multiple layers of history. Exiting the school restores normal perception, as though leaving one reality for another. As the night progresses, activity diminishes. Figures appear less frequently, footsteps grow softer, and lanterns flicker more sporadically. The school gradually settles into stillness, the air heavy with the echoes of its past. By morning, Ashwood School appears unchanged. Sunlight filters through broken panes, illuminating cracked floors, leaning blackboards, and empty classrooms. No visible traces remain of figures, footsteps, or lanterns from the night before, only the lingering impression on those who walked the halls after dark. Visitors often describe lasting impressions: shadows moving along corridors, soft footsteps echoing across classrooms, and whispers drifting from room to room. Ashwood School exists in memory and repetition. By day, it rests silently among the trees. By night, it becomes a stage for figures, footsteps, and flickering lanterns, replaying patterns left by those who once filled its halls with life. When sunlight returns fully, the school settles into quiet once more, waiting patiently for darkness to awaken the echoes of its past again. Widowmaker School stands abandoned at the edge of a forgotten town, its halls and classrooms holding the weight of decades of unexplained disappearances. Its halls and classrooms holding the weight of decades of unexplained disappearances. The building has long been shrouded in a quiet darkness. The building has long been shrouded in a quiet darkness, where shadows move with an unnatural grace. Where shadows move with an unnatural grace, and the faint echo of footsteps and whispered voices carries through empty corridors. During the day, the school seems deceptively ordinary. Visitors often speak of figures appearing suddenly along the hallways. Visitors often speak of figures appearing suddenly along the hallways, vanishing almost as quickly as they are seen, leaving behind a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. Sunlight filters through tall, dusty windows, illuminating cracked floors and peeling paint along walls. Classrooms remain empty, desks arranged in disarray or left in neat rows, reminders of the lives once present within. The faint scent of aged wood and long-forgotten lessons lingers in the air. Every small sound of the creak of a floorboard, the flutter of wind through broken panes, the shift of loose shutters echoes unnaturally along hallways, amplifying the emptiness of the building. The architecture itself shapes the experience. Long corridors twist between classrooms, staircases ascend at sharp angles, and shadows stretch along the walls, bending and shifting with every passing moment. Corners, stairwells, and doorways form pockets of darkness where figures seem to gather, their outlines often merging with the shadows themselves. The structure of Widowmaker School carries sound and movement in ways that make every step feel significant, every creak a reminder that the building remembers. As evening approaches, the school's presence intensifies. The sun sinks low, casting the corridors in deep amber and shadow. Crying and whispered murmurs rise from classrooms and stairwells, drifting along hallways and seeping into every corner. The air grows heavy, pressing subtly against visitors, creating the sensation that something or something follows every step, watching, waiting. They move silently along corridors and staircases, appearing at the tops of stairs or peeking from doorways before disappearing into shadow. Their movements are deliberate, tracing paths once taken by students and staff, leaving an impression of past routines persisting in the present. When noticed, they vanish suddenly, only to reappear elsewhere, always maintaining a quiet rhythm that echoes the lives that once filled the building. They drift from classrooms, hallways, and stairwells, merging with the natural sounds of the building, the groan of old wood, the shifting of dust, the sigh of the wind through broken windows. These murmurs appear without a clear source, responding unpredictably to movement within the school, heightening the sense of unseen presence. Footsteps rise and fall without pattern, shadows shift without explanation, and whispers ebb and flow in corridors. Silence does not diminish them, and stillness often amplifies the sensation of being observed. Researchers examining abandoned schools note that perception in such environments is heightened. Corridors, reflective surfaces, and open stairwells can carry sound and create illusions of movement. Shadows in low light can form shapes that appear animate, and isolation intensifies awareness of minor stimuli. While these factors explain some experiences, they cannot account for the repeated sightings and persistent whispers reported over decades. Figures and whispers follow subtle, repeated patterns. They appear most often in shadowed corners, stairwells, and near classrooms, moving along paths that suggest memory and familiarity. Footsteps and murmurs occur in locations and intervals that feel intentional, as if the building preserves fragments of the past for those willing to notice. Some believe Widowmaker School retains memory. Decades of teaching, learning, and unexplained disappearances may have left impressions in the wood, walls, and floors. Figures could be echoes of staff and students long gone, repeating gestures and routines, while the cries and whispers are residual voices carried forward in the architecture of the school. While the cries and whispers are residual voices carried forward in the architecture of the school. Others attribute the phenomena to environmental factors. Shadows, low lighting, and reflective surfaces combine with the isolation and history of the building to produce experiences that feel deliberate. Movements and sounds may be amplified by the architecture, yet remain untraceable to any living source. Visitors frequently describe heightened awareness. Time seems altered, distances appear distorted, and every sound and shadow carries significance. The building feels alive, observing without confrontation, a silent witness to the past and present. As night deepens, activity gradually diminishes. Figures retreat to corners and stairwells, whispers fade into the background, and the building settles, though it remains never entirely empty. Sunlight illuminates corridors and stairwells, shadows shrink, and the figures vanish. Yet those who leave carry a lingering impression, a sense of awareness that persists beyond the walls of the school. Not fear, but memory. The building preserves echoes of those who once walked its halls. Figures may still move silently along corridors, whispers may continue to drift through empty classrooms, and footsteps may echo without origin. Widowmaker School does not require belief. It exists quietly, shaped by history, architecture, and time. When darkness falls and shadows deepen, it reveals subtle motion, sound, and memory, quietly persisting for those who notice. And when the morning light returns, the school stands silent once more, carrying memory and presence for those attuned to its echoes. Misty Pines School sits quietly at the edge of a dense forest, tall pine trees rising along the schoolyard and casting long, shifting shadows across the cracked pavement. The building itself is weathered, paint peeling from the walls, windows streaked with dirt and age. The playground is empty, swings hanging still, and the once bright colors of the slides and benches faded by years of neglect. Fog rolls in from the surrounding forest, curling along hallways and across the floors, softening edges and swallowing light. Visitors entering the school feel an immediate chill. Each step echoes sharply in the empty hallways, absorbed quickly by the dense mist that clings to the walls. The air is damp and heavy, carrying the scent of rotting wood and cold stone. Shadows bend strangely under the pale light that filters through the windows. There is a sensation that the school itself is aware of their presence, watching silently as they move through hallways and open spaces. Figures begin to appear within the shadows. They glide along corridors, crouch in corners, and linger near doorways. When directly observed, they shift and fade, becoming part of the shadows themselves. Visitors feel these figures before they see them. A light touch along the arm, shoulder, or back, cold and fleeting, spreads quickly before vanishing. Often, when looking directly to find the source, nothing is there. The hallways remain empty, classrooms still and silent, and corners dark. Yet the feeling persists, recurring as visitors continue along the floors and stairwells. Cold brushes trace along the skin with subtle consistency, brief yet deliberate. The school seems alive with memory. Shadows move independently of walls and hallways, fog coils through corridors, and moisture clings to surfaces, glinting faintly in the dim light. Long ago, the school was filled with movement and sound. Children ran along the hallways, teachers guided lessons, and voices filled the classrooms with laughter and instruction. After abandonment, these remnants of life lingered in forms beyond the physical, manifesting as figures, cold touches, and fleeting eyes that peer from the shadows. As night deepens, activity grows more pronounced. Figures glide silently through corridors, classrooms, and stairwells. Cold brushes are felt along walls, doorframes, and floors. Fingers trace lightly across exposed skin, brief yet deliberate. The school acknowledges presence without interference, as though aware of each movement. Despite the unsettling sensations, there is order. Figures do not approach aggressively. Touches remain fleeting. Shadows move independently yet follow an internal rhythm, precise and deliberate. The school itself seems to orchestrate these movements, replaying memories in a measured and patient fashion. Those who pause notice subtle changes. Cold brushes fade. Figures retreat into deeper shadows. Mist thickens in hallways and classrooms, softening shapes and obscuring details. Silence fills the space, patient and observant, before activity resumes. When movement returns, it mirrors prior patterns. Figures glide through corridors and classrooms. Cold touches occur along arms and shoulders. Shadows shift independently of walls and doors, following paths that are deliberate but non-threatening. Photographs reveal empty hallways, fog, and shadowed corners, rarely capturing the figures themselves. Video footage shows drifting forms and pale points of light that vanish when approached. Audio records only faint echoes, the creak of floors, or distant footsteps, indistinct yet undeniably present. Environmental conditions explain some perceptions. Fog, low light, and moisture can create optical illusions and distort shadows. Yet these explanations fail to account for the precision and consistency of cold brushes, deliberate movements, and fleeting glimpses of figures and glowing eyes. As the night approaches its quietest hours, activity diminishes. Figures dissolve into shadows, cold brushes cease, and glowing eyes fade. Silence fills the school, broken only by faint groans of the old building. By morning, Misty Pines School appears calm and ordinary. Sunlight illuminates peeling walls, dusty classrooms, and the empty playground. Visitors leaving often pause at the entrance. The building looks ordinary, yet those who explored it at night recall figures gliding silently along hallways. Cold hands brushing lightly, and shadows moving independently. The sense of being observed by the school itself lingers, leaving an impression that cannot be easily shaken. Misty Pines School remains, shaped by shadow, fog, and memory. By day, it is silent and unassuming. By day, it is silent and unassuming. By night, when fog drifts through hallways and shadows lengthen along corridors and stairwells, it becomes something entirely different. Figures glide silently along corridors and stairwells. Cold hands brush lightly along arms. Shadows shift independently of walls and doors. And for a brief time, the school remembers the life it once contained, before retreating again into shadow, mist, and stillness. Blackroot School stands isolated on the edge of a dense forest. Its dark brick walls absorbing the pale glow of the moon. The windows are cracked and dusty, reflecting faint fragments of starlight. While the roof sags in places, weighed down by years of neglect and weather. The surrounding grounds are overgrown, with twisted roots pushing through cracks in the paths and climbing the sides of the building. A cold wind moves silently through the empty playground, carrying the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the faint, lingering memory of chalk and paper. As night settles, Blackroot School begins to stir. Figures emerge briefly, then vanish. Pale shapes appear along the hallways, moving slowly between classrooms, pausing at doorways and stairwells. They are translucent, their forms flickering in and out of existence as if caught between this world and another. When approached, they disappear, leaving only a faint trace of presence, a shadow lingering in the corner of vision, a slight chill in the air. Walls and floors appear black under moonlight. The corridors are long and narrow, their wooden floors warped and creaking under the slightest weight. Moonlight filters through broken panes, casting sharp contrasts of light and shadow along the walls. The darkness seems almost alive, moving subtly as figures pass, shadows stretching and twisting, merging with the forms that appear and vanish. The blackened surfaces amplify every sound, making soft footsteps, distant doors closing, and the rustle of unseen movement echo through the empty halls. Visitors hear faint chanting carried on the wind. It rises from nowhere and everywhere at once, low and melodic, almost hypnotic. The chant drifts through open windows, around corners, and down the stairwells. It is soft, almost imperceptible at first, yet persistent, as if the building itself is breathing in rhythm with the sound. Those who pause to listen may catch fragments of voices, indistinct words carried across the cold night air, filling the school with the resonance of memories long past. Blackroot School was once a vibrant center of learning. Children filled the hallways with laughter, pencils scratched across paper, and shoes tapped rhythmically along wooden floors. Teachers moved between rooms, lessons echoing in classrooms. Over time, the school was abandoned, its students and educators gone, leaving only the structure and the lingering traces of their presence. The building, darkened and silent, holds the echoes of its history, preserving memory in the shadows and in the faint sounds that drift through empty halls. Explorers report strange phenomena. Hallways appear longer than reason allows, and corners seem to bend slightly, distorting perception. Shadows twist independently of any light source. Figures reappear in different sections of the building, pacing along corridors, near doors, or in the faint glow of moonlight streaming through broken windows. Footsteps echo in rhythm with those walking, creating the sensation of being followed by unseen presences that observe without intrusion. A nighttime exploration of the main corridor. A figure appeared near a classroom doorway, standing motionless. Moonlight cast long, shifting shadows across the floor and walls. A cold brush of air passed over the shoulder, and turning revealed only empty hallways stretching into darkness. Moments later, the figure vanished entirely, leaving behind the soft echo of footsteps and a faint, low murmur that seemed to come from the far end of the corridor. Another group exploring multiple areas of the school experienced similar occurrences. Shadows drifted silently past walls. Figures appeared intermittently, then disappeared. Whispered voices rose and fell, blending with creaking floorboards and the faint sigh of wind through broken windows. Visitors felt a presence close, brushing their shoulders, fleeting and intangible, aware yet never hostile. Despite the haunting, Blackroot School does not feel threatening. Figures do not chase. Shadows do not strike. The unease comes from awareness rather than danger. The school preserves the echoes of the past, allowing visitors to walk freely while sensing subtle, unseen observers embedded in the walls, floors, and hallways. Allowing visitors to walk freely while sensing subtle, unseen observers embedded in the walls, floors, and hallways. As the night deepens, activity fades. Shadows settle, footsteps and whispers diminish, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves outside and the creak of the building settling in its foundations. By morning, Blackroot School returns to stillness. Moonlight fades, revealing the blackened floors and walls, the overgrown grounds, and silent classrooms. Figures vanish. Doors remain closed. The building rests, awaiting the night to awaken its hidden echoes once again. Blackroot School exists where memory, shadow, and silence converge. Figures emerge briefly, lanterns glow without being held, and faint chanting drifts through the corridors. The building observes quietly, preserving echoes of the past for those who wander its haunted halls. Hollowbrook School sits quietly along a winding creek, its brick walls weathered and windows clouded with dust and age. The grounds are overgrown, grass and weeds creeping through cracked walkways. And the air carries the faint scent of damp earth and old timber. Each step echoes softly through the abandoned building, a reminder of the countless students who once walked these floors. Approaching the school, the sound of water from the nearby creek mingles with the whisper of wind through trees. As evening falls, the atmosphere shifts. Darkness stretches through corridors and stairwells, pooling in corners and beneath broken windows. The creaking of old boards, the rustle of leaves outside, and the soft babble of the creek combine to create a quiet symphony of presence. The school seems to awaken, and every shadow appears alive with memory. Visitors report seeing figures moving along stairwells, through hallways, and across classrooms. The figures appear human in shape but blurred, indistinct, as if they are echoes rather than solid forms. Their movements are deliberate, gliding silently as if replaying routines from decades past. Faces and details remain unseen, leaving only the impression of presence and motion. In classrooms, figures pause near desks or blackboards, standing as if listening to lessons long since ended. Their presence is neither threatening nor aggressive, but it carries the unmistakable feeling of memory and history lingering in the building. A subtle tension across the air. Their presence is neither threatening nor aggressive, but it carries the unmistakable feeling of memory and history lingering in the building. Soft footsteps echo throughout the hallways and stairwells. Sometimes a single step moves deliberately, other times multiple steps cross and intersect, layering sound upon sound. The floorboards creak and groan under the weight of no visible feet. These echoes are precise and measured, as if the building itself is replaying the movements of those who once walked its halls. Whispers drift through the classrooms and corridors. Names are softly called, fragments of conversation float along drafts. Distant voices carry faintly from one room to the next. The whispers are not hostile, they are gentle, almost mournful. Acknowledging the presence of anyone walking the halls. The feeling that the school itself is alive with memory. A place where time has folded upon itself. Hollowbrook School has a history marked by both learning and tragedy. Stories tell of accidents, untimely deaths, and illness that affected students and staff alike. Many who explore the school at night believe the figures, footsteps, and whispers are the echoes of these lives, replaying their routines and movements through the building that once contained them. Sound behaves unpredictably within the school. Footsteps and whispers carry differently depending on the room or hallway, sometimes amplified, sometimes faint. Each classroom, stairwell, and corridor holds its own resonance, layered with memory and history, creating a sense of presence that is tangible but unseen. Time seems to shift when walking the school after dark. Minutes stretch and compress without warning. Silence grows heavy, and moving through the corridors feels like traversing multiple layers of history at once. Stepping outside returns normal perception, leaving visitors with an enduring sense of the school's nighttime presence. As night deepens, the activity of figures and footsteps lessens. Lanterns, often flickering without any visible source, sway gently before dimming. And the soft echoes of movement fade. The school settles into stillness, resting amid broken desks, leaning blackboards, and empty classrooms, carrying the memories of its past quietly into the night. By morning, Hollowbrook School appears unchanged. Sunlight filters through the broken windows, highlighting cracked floors, empty desks, and the overgrown grounds. The figures, footsteps, and flickering lights vanish as if they were never there, leaving only the lingering impression of their presence in the minds of those who witnessed them. Visitors often describe a lasting effect, the feeling of being observed, shadows moving along stairwells, soft footsteps echoing across floors, and whispers drifting from classrooms and hallways. Hollowbrook School exists in a delicate balance between memory and silence. By day, it rests quietly, abandoned and still. By night, it becomes alive, a stage for figures, footsteps, and whispers, replaying the echoes of lives that once animated its halls. The echoes of lives that once animated its halls. When daylight fully returns, the school falls back into quietude, waiting patiently for darkness to awaken its memories once more. Blood Willow School sits quietly at the edge of a long-forgotten neighborhood, framed by willow trees that sway unnaturally even when the air is still. Their long, twisting branches reach toward the ground, brushing the cracked walkways and casting deep shadows that seem to move with a life of their own. The school has a history marked by vanished students and staff, their absences lingering like a quiet hum in the structure itself. Visitors often report seeing figures crouching near entrances or peering silently from shadowed corners, while faint whispers and soft laughter drift along empty corridors. During daylight, the school appears calm yet unwelcoming. Sunlight filters through tall, dusty windows, highlighting classrooms with worn floors and peeling paint. Desks remain in neat rows or scattered haphazardly, remnants of a time when the building thrived with activity. The air carries the faint scent of aged wood and lingering dust. And every small sound of the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of branches against windows, the sigh of wind through broken panisa echoes unnaturally, amplifying the emptiness. The architecture of Blood Willow School shapes every experience. Long corridors stretch between classrooms, staircases ascend in sharp angles, and the willow branches outside frame every window with dark, twisting patterns. Shadows gather along doorways and beneath overhanging beams, shifting as the day changes. The structure carries sound and movement in ways that make each step feel significant, each creak a reminder of the presence of the past. As evening approaches, the atmosphere grows heavier. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across hallways and classrooms. The willow trees outside sway in the dim light, their branches scraping against windows and walls. Faint whispers rise from corners, stairwells, and open doors, drifting through corridors and blending with the natural creaks and groans of the old building. The air feels denser, pressing gently against those who walk its halls, heightening the sense of unseen observers. It is during these hours that figures are most often observed. They crouch near entrances or linger in shadowed hallways, moving silently as if retracing routines once familiar to staff and students. Sometimes they pause, glancing toward visitors, only to vanish suddenly, appearing elsewhere in another corridor or classroom. Their movements feel deliberate, echoing the patterns of life that once filled the building. The figures remain elusive. They do not approach directly, choosing instead to stay at the edges of perception. When noticed, they may dissolve into shadow, leaving behind only the faint impression of motion and presence. Their silent rhythm continues, as if the building preserves fragments of the past for those who pass through it. Alongside the figures, whispers and soft laughter persist. They drift unpredictably from classrooms, hallways, and stairwells, mingling with the natural sounds of the buildinga, the shifting of dust, the sway of branches, the distant echo of floorboards. These sounds appear independent of visitors, rising and falling without clear origin, creating the sensation that the school itself is alive with memory. The source of these whispers is difficult to discern. They emerge in one corner and fade only to appear elsewhere. Silence does not diminish them, and stillness can amplify the awareness of presence. Environmental factors contribute to the experience. Shadows, low lighting, reflective surfaces, and open stairwells carry and distort sound in unique ways. The isolation of the building heightens sensitivity to minor stimuli, while the creaking wood and swaying branches outside create effects that feel purposeful. Yet, these explanations alone cannot account for the repeated sightings, consistent patterns, and reports of laughter that have endured for decades. Figures appear in shadowed corners, near stairwells, and at entrances, moving along paths that suggest familiarity and memory. Whispers occur in recurring locations, fading and returning as if the building itself preserves echoes of the past. Some believe Blood Willow School holds memory. Decades of lessons, laughter, and unexplained disappearances may have left impressions within the wood, floors, and walls. Figures may be echoes of those long gone, repeating gestures and routines, while whispers and laughter carry fragments of voices preserved in the environment. Visitors often report heightened awareness. Time seems to stretch, distances shift, and every step and shadow carries weight. The school feels alive, attentive, and watchful, though not hostile. Figures retreat into shadowed corners, whispers fade, and the building settles into quiet, though never entirely empty. By morning, Blood Willow School appears unchanged. Sunlight illuminates hallways and classrooms, shadows shrink, and figures vanish. Yet those who leave carry a lingering impression, a sense that the school continues to observe and preserve echoes of its past. Not fear, but memory. The building holds fragments of life once lived within it. Figures may continue to move silently along hallways, whispers may drift through classrooms, and faint laughter may rise from corners unseen. Blood Willow School requires no belief to exist. It stands quietly, shaped by history, architecture, and time. When night falls and shadows deepen, subtle motion, sound, and presence reveal themselves to those who notice. Along corridors and stairwells, figures continue their silent rhythm. Through shadows, oak beams, and empty classrooms, whispers and faint laughter persist. When morning light returns, the school stands still, carrying memory, presence, and quiet echoes for those attuned to its enduring spirit. Phantom Creek School sits at the edge of a dense forest, its brick walls weathered and windows streaked with age. The building is quiet, yet the air is heavy with presence, thick with mist that creeps along hallways and seeps under doors. Visitors entering the school feel the chill immediately. Each step echoes sharply in empty hallways, swallowed quickly by the damp, heavy air. The floors creak underfoot, and every sound seems amplified, yet quickly absorbed by the fog and shadows. A subtle sense of being watched lingers, as if the building itself acknowledges every movement, every pause, every cautious breath. Figures begin to appear within the shadows. They rise along corridors, crouch near doorways, and glide silently through rooms. Their forms are human but indistinct, merging with darkness and mist. When observed directly, they shift and fade, blending seamlessly into the environment. When attention drifts, they reappear, moving along paths that feel deliberate yet impossible to follow fully. A light brush along an arm, a fleeting press at the shoulder, cold and precise, spreads quickly before vanishing. The touch is never aggressive, yet its presence is undeniable, leaving a shiver that lingers long after it fades. Turning to find the source often reveals nothing. Empty hallways, silent classrooms, and shadowed corners remain, yet the sensation persists. As visitors continue through the school, the cold touches repeat, along arms, shoulders, and even the back of the neck, subtle and deliberate. The school itself seems alive with memory. Shadows move independently of walls and doors. Fog coils through hallways, following paths that the air itself should not allow. Moisture clings to walls and floors, glinting faintly in the pale light of distant lanterns that appear along corridors with no source. Every creak, every groan of timber, carries echoes of footsteps long gone. Phantom Creek School preserves fragments of life. replaying them silently in classrooms, hallways, and stairwells. Once, the school was full of movement and sound. Children ran across the hallways, teachers guided lessons, and voices echoed throughout the building. After abandonment, fragments of that life remained, manifesting as figures, fleeting touches, and glimpses of pale eyes peering from corners. As night deepens, activity becomes more pronounced. Figures glide along hallways and stairwells. Cold brushes are felt near walls, doorways, and empty classrooms. Fingers trace lightly along exposed skin, brief and deliberate. The school acknowledges presence without interference, aware of every step. Despite the unsettling sensation, there is order. Figures do not approach aggressively. Touches remain fleeting. Shadows shift independently yet follow a deliberate rhythm, as if orchestrated by the building itself. Each movement is measured, precise, and patient, repeating routines embedded in memory. Those who pause notice subtle shifts. Cold brushes vanish. Figures retreat into deeper shadows. Mist thickens, softening edges and swallowing details. Silence fills the corridors, patient and observant, before movement resumes. When activity returns, it mirrors prior patterns. Figures glide silently along hallways, stairwells, and classrooms. Photographs show empty corridors and mist-filled classrooms. Video footage reveals drifting forms and pale points of light that vanish when approached. Audio records only distant creaks, soft echoes of footsteps, and the faint rustle of movement, indistinct yet undeniably present. Environmental conditions explain some perceptions. Attempts to capture these phenomena are often inconclusive. Phantom Creek School becomes a theater of memory, replaying routines long abandoned. Fog, low light, and moisture can create illusions, distorting shadows and shapes. These conditions cannot account for the precision, consistency, and deliberate nature of cold brushes, fleeting figures, and glowing eyes. As night reaches its quietest hours, activity diminishes. Figures dissolve into shadows. Cold brushes fade. Glowing eyes vanish. Silence fills the building, broken only by faint groans of the timber and distant whispers of wind through the trees. By morning, Phantom Creek School appears ordinary. Sunlight filters through the trees, illuminating peeling walls and empty classrooms. The feeling of being observed by the building itself lingers, leaving an impression that cannot be shaken. Phantom Creek School remains, shaped by shadow, mist, and memory. By day, it is silent and unassuming. Figures glide silently along corridors and stairwells. Cold hands brush lightly along arms. Shadows move independently of walls and doors. And for a brief time, the school remembers the life it once contained. Before retreating again into mist, shadow, and stillness. Darkwater School looms atop a hill, surrounded by twisted trees. And mist that clings to the grounds like a living thing. Its brick walls are darkened by years of wind and rain. Windows cracked and dusty, reflecting only faint glimmers of the moonlight. The roof sags in places, weighed down by time and neglect. And the once pristine playgrounds are now overgrown, with roots pushing through cracks in the asphalt. A cold breeze drifts through the empty halls, carrying the scent of damp wood, old paper, and chalk dust. The forest presses close, brushing branches against the walls. And the building seems to inhale with every whisper of the wind. As night falls, Darkwater School awakens. Figures rise silently along corridors and staircases. Pale shapes appear near classroom doors, along railings, or in the shadowed corners of hallways. Their forms are indistinct, flickering between solidity and transparency, as if caught between worlds. They move slowly and deliberately, pausing to watch the living visitors who tread their paths. When approached, they vanish, leaving only a lingering chill, the faint echo of footsteps, or the sensation of unseen eyes upon the observer. Ghostly lanterns float above classrooms. Soft light drifts along the ceilings, illuminating the edges of desks, chalkboards, and forgotten books. Visitors hear footsteps, whispers, and faint cries following them. The sounds echo through empty corridors, perfectly synchronized with each step. Doors creak open and shut without wind. Lockers rattle. Occasionally, a soft thump reverberates as if a book has fallen in another room. Whispers rise and fall, distant and unintelligible, carrying an unsettling familiarity. Faint cries echo through the halls, never loud enough to identify, yet persistent enough to awaken awareness. Darkwater School was once a hub of learning. Children filled the hallways with laughter and chatter. Teachers moved from room to room, their lessons echoing down corridors. Over time, populations shifted and new schools were built, leaving Darkwater School abandoned. Yet the memories of those who passed through remain, embedded in the very walls, floors, and ceilings. The building is alive with echoes, preserving fragments of the past and allowing them to mingle with the present. Explorers report strange distortions. Corridors appear longer than possible. Hallways twist subtly in perception, bending corners and doors. Figures reappear in different locations, moving along invisible tracks known only to them. Shadows shift independently of light sources, creating an impression of movement without form. Every sound of footsteps, whispers, soft thumps seems in perfect rhythm with the observer, as if the school is aware of each presence. One visitor recounted walking down the main staircase. A figure appeared halfway up, motionless, its form flickering in the dim moonlight. Lanterns floated above the classrooms, casting long shadows that shifted across floors and walls. A cold brush of air passed over the shoulder, leaving the visitor with the sensation of being followed. Turning revealed empty hallways stretching into darkness. Moments later, the figure vanished entirely, leaving only the soft echoes of footsteps and a distant, faint murmur. Another group exploring multiple classrooms experienced similar phenomena. Shadows moved silently past walls. Figures appeared near doors or windows, then disappeared into the darkness. Whispered voices rose and fell, blending with the creak of floorboards and the soft sigh of wind through broken panes. Visitors felt a presence close, brushing their shoulders, fleeting and intangible, aware yet never hostile. Despite the haunting, Darkwater School does not feel threatening. Figures do not chase. Shadows do not strike. Sounds drift softly through the building. The sense of unease arises from perception and awareness rather than danger. The school preserves echoes of the past, allowing visitors to walk freely while sensing subtle, unseen observers embedded in walls, floors, and ceilings. Activity gradually fades as night deepens. Shadows settle along floors and walls. Footsteps and whispers diminish, leaving only the rustle of leaves outside and the quiet settling of the building. By morning, Darkwater School returns to stillness. Sunlight illuminates hallways, classrooms, and overgrown grounds. Shadows retreat to corners. Figures vanish, doors remain closed, and the school rests. It waits silently, storing memories and echoes, until night falls again. Figures rise silently, ghostly lanterns float above classrooms, and footsteps and whispers drift through the halls. The building observes quietly, preserving echoes of the past, carrying them into the present for those who wander its haunted corridors. Darkwater School exists where memory, shadow, and silence converge. Thank you, my dear friend, for walking with me tonight through the haunted forest schools of North Carolina. These schools may seem quiet by day, but by night they are alive with shadows, whispers, and spirits that refuse to rest. If you ever wander through a forest school at night, and fog drifts low, or shadows move along hallways, or lanterns appear floating above classrooms. Remember this. Not every shadow is harmless. Not every corridor is safe. And not every figure belongs to the world of the living. Walk carefully. Keep your lanterns close. And may the spirits of the forest schools leave you to return safely until our next haunted journey, my dear friend.